Okay. So hopefully you were able to do that takeaway assignment that I gave you. Here's how I handled mine. I have my unordered list here. And what I did was I changed the list style type from a circle to a square, and then bolded the text inside that unordered list using a font weight. An interesting dilemma here is that our Z's and pizza run together, but that's okay. It's clear that it's still pizza to me, so I'm happy with that. If you're unhappy with it, though, there's actually CSS that you can use to space your letters further apart. So you could explore that too. And again, I just want to walk through that. I added an unordered list style here, style rule set. There's my curly braces, and then list style type, I set that to square, font weight, bold. You could also do something like semi-bold. Is it not semi-bold? I thought it was semi-bold. Some demi-bold, ultra-bold, semi-bold, 600. Forgot you had to use the number there. So there's numbers that you can use as well. So if we change that, save it, not much really changed. It's about the same. But yeah, you have more customization with numbers here with font weight as well, or you can use the keywords like bold or bolder, and so on. I'll use 600. Okay, so now we have a web page. It's styled. It has some information about us. This is pretty great. We've come a long way in just like an hour. But now we want to make this interactive. The hard part about a project like this is figuring out what we want to make interactive. So we have a couple options, and we're going to do two pieces of interactivity. The first one is through CSS. A long time ago, this used to not be an option. CSS has gotten very, very powerful, so now we can do a lot of really neat things with CSS. So I'll make this really simple. We're going to add a class to our H1 that says My Personal Web Page. And we're going to call this class Personal Web Page. We'll add a new style here, and we'll type dot personal web page :hover. And we haven't talked about these yet, but this is a modifier, I guess that'd be a good way to put it, for personal web page. So these styles will only apply to the personal web page when this modifier is true. This modifier is specifically when the user is hovering over the content of personal web page. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the color equal to blue violet. That's a pretty color. If we save and come back and refresh, nothing changed. However, if we hover over personal web page, now it's blue, violet, or purple. When we move away, it goes back to normal. That's pretty cool. One thing that's interesting, I'm not on it right now. I'm on this block of empty text over to the side, right? How does that work? So if we look at this, technically the content for this personal web page goes all the way across the screen. Part of the reason why is that this is what we call a block element. So an H1 is a block element. We can change this if we set the display to inline block. Now you see it doesn't take up the whole page. It just takes up the stuff that's relevant for it. Okay. I don't really care in this point, but you can explore that if you'd like. I'm not going to save those because I don't care to keep those changes, but I do want the highlighting to happen whenever you hover over it. Let's make this a little cleaner though. We can actually say personal web page, and notice this is another set of styles for personal web page. The reason why we choose another set of styles here is because this one's specifically for hovering, and this one's whenever you're not hovering. This is just general. I shouldn't say not hovering. It's when you are or are not hovering. So in our case, we want to set something like transition. And we want something like color, 2 seconds. Save it, reload, and then you notice it transitioned over time. 2 seconds is maybe a long time, so let's maybe say 0.5 seconds. Refresh, and it kind of like, it fades in and out of color. It doesn't immediately switch. This allows us to make this a little nicer. And the reason I really wanted to show you this is that for a long time in web development, we would have to use JavaScript to make these type of transitions happen. Now it's built into the browser with the transition API, and it's really nice, clean, and performant. It's the better way to do these types of transitions. But there are certain things we want to do that can't be transitions. So for example, if I were to want to make it so you can, if you click on the dog image, maybe we want to give you some more information. So what we could do here is we can add a script tag to our body. You can add them to your head or your body, but one practice we've seen more and more commonly is that people tend to add them to the end of their body. Part of the reason why is that the script tags usually aren't relevant until the page is fully loaded, and the page has to load the script tag first. So if you are, if it's up front, the page has to upload the script or load the script tag first. So we put the styles up front so that the page can start styling itself before it even has content. This helps prevent flashes where maybe the content shows and then it's not styled, but then is styled. With the script stuff, we generally don't care to have it run as soon as the page loads, right? So in our case, what we can do is we can add a script tag to the bottom, and we can write some JavaScript. JavaScript is the most complex out of the three languages we're talking about: HTML, CSS, JavaScript. There is a lot going on here. So I'm going to try to keep it simple, and we're going to say let image equal document.getElementById. I'm going to try to also write this in a way where it sounds close, as close as it can to plain English. So we're saying, hey, let an image be equal to, so I'm going to create a variable called image and let it be equal to the document.getElementById. So the document is our entire web page right here. GetElementById is a function that gets an element by an ID and returns it. So the ID we want is best image, right? Best image. Now that we have this, I'm going to show you two very important debugging tools. The first one is the console. So if we type console.log and then pass in image, refresh, inspect, and go to console here, you can see that we were able to get the image. This is great. This means we successfully looked it up. Our selector's good. Everything's good. In the console, we can click this, and it'll actually take us to the inspector and show us the node, which is really, really nice. The important thing here is that I want to prove that this works. Another option, so you have some scripts, right? Like this. What we can do is we can add the word debugger. It's very, very important that you remove this as soon as you're done with it. It's okay to have console logs. You probably don't want them, but this will hijack your web page and put it in a debugging experience. Like this, paused on debugger statement. You can see here a couple things. The reason this is more valuable than the console log is that we have access to a ton of information about the running JavaScript. We can see the scope that it's working in. Sorry, I'm in the way again. Let me move back over here. Okay, we can see the scope that it's running in over here. We can see what we're working with, any other breakpoints we have, some expressions. We don't really have any right now. And then one thing that's really nice is we can hover over these and see more information about them. So we can hover over the document and see what's available on the document. We can hover over this and see that it's a function. We can hover over the string and see that it's a string, and then we can hover over image and see, hey, look, the information that this image has. It has a class name called dogImage. Yeah, that's right. It has a current source of bradwithluna.webpage. That's also right. So you can look at any of that type of stuff too. The debugger can be confusing. The short and sweet is that you can use this play button to continue, and then if we were to refresh the page again, it would trigger the debugger again. So let's remove it so it doesn't get triggered again. Okay, I've refreshed, it didn't trigger. Now that we have this image, we may want to say image.onClick. So So this fires when the user clicks on the left mouse button on the object. So we can set this equal to something like event alert, that's my dog. Save this, click it, and you can see it says, that's my dog. This maybe isn't like the coolest thing you could do with JavaScript. Perhaps another example would be if you had several images here, you could swap out the images. You know what? Let's see if we can do that. I don't think I have another picture of my other dog on hand, but we do have this other image, right? So let's swap it out. So before we do that, I'm rushing very far ahead. Let's talk about this. This adds something called an on-click listener. By default, this is null or undefined. That means it doesn't exist. We are setting this property to something that does exist. And the way this works is when you have this property, anytime you click on an image or anytime you click on an element, it will check to see if there's an on-click listener. If there is an on-click listener, it will execute it. If it doesn't exist, it won't execute it because there's nothing to execute. So in our case here, we're setting this equal to a function. This is a function. Excuse me. This is a function. This is a shorthand syntax for functions. There's a parameter called an event. We're not using the event. That's okay. And then there's this fat arrow or equals greater than. Two symbols, equals greater than. We call it a fat arrow. And then we call the alert function. Alert is something provided by the browser that just gives you a message. And again, it looks like this. Not the prettiest thing, but it's cool. It works. But maybe we want to do something else, right? So we can keep this part because this part's the same. But maybe we want to do something like, say, image.source is equal to, and then paste. Now if we try this, you can see it just changed the image. That's pretty good. This gives you the ability to swap out images, make carousels, do interactive things like accordions that open and close. Fun fact, you can also probably do those in CSS. And a lot of like that interactive stuff that you see on web pages that are really nice. This is also a really common way JavaScript's a really common way to get data from an external source and load data. So for example, when you scroll through Twitter and you hit load more tweets, that triggers JavaScript to go get more data and then put that data on the web page. And then you keep scrolling and you keep scrolling and then you run out of new tweets and you hit load more tweets. It calls the same JavaScript function actually to go get more tweets and then puts those on the web page. And that's how it works. Like with that in mind and the tools that we've talked about so far, you could build something like that. You don't have a data source with dynamic content and you don't have the ability to let users update and upload that content, but you have the functionality and the skill set now to start on exploring a path like that. Okay, so that's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's so much you can do with JavaScript. And in fact, again, I will point you to the MDN documentation. JavaScript is MDN's bread and butter. JavaScript has had a renaissance over the past 10, 15 years, and there's so much you can do with it. I highly recommend browsing through this, finding the stuff that sounds interesting to you, and then really digging into it. Another really good example of something that's a little more complex, this would be getting data from another website via JavaScript. That's called a fetch request, where you fetch data from another website. Excuse me. That would be a really great thing to practice because it's very, very common, but you also don't need it for your personal site. Having it static like this is probably good. I'm going to refresh so I look a little less full of myself. Okay, so we have added a script tag. There's so much you can do here. And the key thing that I want to drive home with this in this series is that HTML is your content. CSS makes your content look pretty. JavaScript makes your content interactive. That's it. That's all I wanted to do. If you want to learn more about JavaScript, there are so many great places. The MDN documentation is where I would recommend starting. YouTube is a treasure trove of people talking about JavaScript. And actually, I plan on doing more vanilla JavaScript content in the future too. So you could look for that as well.